Hi, welcome to this video. I'm Ellen Cool, and as the title of this video says, I am going to wrap up all of the books that I read within the last 3 months, which is the third quarter of this year, so July, August, and September. I haven't been filming a whole lot of videos lately, and that's mainly because I just haven't wanted to. I have tried filming a couple of videos in the past 3 months, and just I haven't liked any of them. I have not enjoyed filming it either, and as I'm filming it, I'm just not liking what I'm saying, so I just stop it, which is unfortunate because I do very much enjoy putting content out there, but also too with this job that I have, I don't exactly have a lot of free time, but surprisingly I had enough free time to read 19 books within this third quarter. As always, I'm going to talk about these books within rating order, so my least favorite to my favorite. Let's just get right into it. My lowest rated book of my stack is Duke Actually by Jenny Holiday. Okay, so I guess this is kind of a spoiler. I'm starting to read books for a vlog that's going to come out around Christmas time. I'm going to read a bunch of Christmas romances. I have started in September to read Christmas books because it's going to take me a long time to read all the Christmas books that I want to read, so I'm going to try and spread them out. But I did read this one, and I guess spoiler for the vlog, I didn't particularly like it. It was fine, but I think I definitely preferred reading it just physically rather than the audiobook, because I did listen to the audiobook at times, and then there were times where I couldn't, so I just read it physically. And I think it was better physically, but there were a lot of character choices within this book that I didn't quite like. So within this book, I think it was marketed as enemies to lovers, which it's more of a friends to lovers. I don't see the enemy aspect to it. I see it a little bit, but it's more so they're friends, and then it's a friends to lovers romance that takes place from a Christmas all the way to the next Christmas. And we have the man of honor and the best woman for a royal wedding. The princess of some country is getting married to a guy from New York, and we have this guy who is not a duke, he is a baron, and she is I think just a teacher or a professor in America, and they, while having to do their best woman and man of honor duties, they form an attachment. And there is a reference to Love Actually, which is why it's called Duke Actually. But overall, again, I don't want to give out too much because it's going to be spoilers for that vlog, but I gave this 2.5 stars. I have another 2.5 star, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This was going to be a book to movie adaptation video, but I never got a chance to actually watch the movie. So I still have not seen the movie, which is fine because I really did not like this book. We follow, what is her name? We follow Kaya. In this town, she is known as the Marsh Girl, and we are also living in the 1960s, and we're going back and forth between the time before a murder happened and the time after a murder happened. And the Marsh Girl is being accused for this murder, and till the end, you don't really quite know if she did it or not. I will say it does keep you guessing in that aspect. I felt it was quite racist at times, and I know that that's the point because that's the time period it's in, but it still was just it cringed me. That's not the correct. It made me cringe. It just did not sit well with me, as well as too I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about anything that was happening. I just didn't care. So I gave it 2.5 stars. It was fine, but overall, meh. Now we're skipping the 3 stars and going straight to 3.5 stars, and the lowest of 3.5 stars is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. This is definitely a very lackluster series, and just a series of romance novels that are just not great, but I'm still going to read them because I just love the show so much. And this is Penelope and Colin's story, which is what we're going to be following in the next season of Bridgerton, which I'm very excited for. I do think this is the better of the past Bridgerton books that I've read, so this is like the best within the series so far. But it's still meh. Like, I still just didn't really feel anything. I also really think that these Bridgerton men have such anger issues that they desperately need anger management, because they're constantly getting mad about things that are so stupid, and Penelope is just like the sweetest thing, almost a little too sweet for my taste, especially to put up with the things that Colin does and says, and it just, the books really do the men a disservice, while the TV show, ugh, the men are fantastic. But yeah, so 3.5. My next 3.5 star is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I have read every single Riley Sager book. He is an auto-buy author for me. However, his previous book before this, I rated even less than this. I really did not like that one. And this one I was worried, because I was like, I've been really liking his stuff except for his latest, so hopefully this one is fine. This is actually one of those books where I keep going back and forth between liking it and not liking it, and that was even happening while I was reading. I was like, ooh, okay, I'm liking it, and then I wasn't liking it, and then I was liking it, and then I wasn't. And then even after finishing it, I still, like to this day, I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this book. So in this book, we follow a woman, Casey Fletcher. She is the daughter of an actress and a director, and so she's kind of well known and famous in the world, and she kind of has created her own acting career. And she had a couple of not so great moments. She has lost her husband, who passed away, and then she has been having a drinking problem, and she has now been fired from the play that she was in because she was completely drunk on stage and completely like ruined it and whatnot. So she goes to her family's lake house that's kind of secluded and just wants to like rehabilitate, get away from the world for a bit, you know, whatever. And this was also a lake house that her and her husband had shared together. Now we also do get introduced to the neighbors that are within this lake town, but there are two new neighbors, a model and her husband, who I believe had started this app. Her and the woman kind of create a friendship, but then the woman goes missing. Our main character Casey here is convinced that the husband has killed her or whatever. It's a wild ride that gets very crazy by the end. Like, there are twists and twists and twists and twists. Some of the writing was a little meh for me. Like, it definitely started off way too slow and then just like rushed the ending. Also, there is a little bit of, I don't want to give too much away, but there is a little bit of paranormal within this book, which I did not know going into it. But if you like paranormal, I think you might like this, because that was an aspect I actually did like about the book. I know most people, I don't think, liked that aspect, but I liked that because I do like paranormal. Not quite sure what to think about this book still, and I think I'm going to be questioning my thoughts on this book for the rest of my life, but it's sitting at a 3.5. My next 3.5 is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I read Ali Hazelwood's The Love Hypothesis last year, gave it 5 stars, absolutely loved it. Highly looking forward to this book, and I enjoyed it a little bit. It's definitely not as great as The Love Hypothesis, but it is very similar to The Love Hypothesis in the sense that we are following two main characters that are within STEM. I forget who she works for, but he works for NASA, and then NASA then hires, oh right, she's a neuroscientist. NASA then hires her to work with him on a project that is like creating helmets for the astronauts or whatever. And these two, it's an enemies to lovers story slash co-worker lovers story. And it was fine. I definitely enjoyed parts of it, but then there was also that just was like, I don't really care. The ending did get quite wild. Just like with the last book I talked about, this ending got wild. I still enjoyed it, but just obviously not as much as The Love Hypothesis. My next 3.5 is The Life Below by Alexandra Moner. This is the sequel and final book to the Final Six duology, and I definitely liked the Final Six more. This time we're actually in space rather than in the final 6, which was kind of like the competition schooling to go into space. It does get kind of crazy, but I will say most of it is forgettable, which I think is why I have it at 3.5, because I don't remember a lot of what happens in this. And some of the writing was also a little bit confusing. I felt like I had to reread certain parts because I was confused as to what happened. But overall, I guess I enjoyed it. That's why it's sitting at the higher 3.5. And then my last 3.5 is The Way Back Home by Courtney Peppernell. I have read a bunch of Courtney Peppernell's poetry. I really like her stuff, but this so far has been my least favorite of hers that I've read. I definitely enjoyed more of the beginning, and rather than the end, I felt like I connected more with stuff that was happening in the beginning of this poetry collection. So poetry is always so hard to rate because, like, it's very much of how, like, a personal impact it has on you. And so, yeah, the beginning, a lot of personal impact. The second half, not so much. But I still enjoy her stuff and will continue reading her poetry. My first of the 4 stars is Black Water by Jeanette Arroyo and Ren Graham. This is a graphic novel following a group of teens. 2 of them, you would not think they would get along with each other. One's kind of like popular sports bad boy, and the other is like a geeky, nerdy kid who also has this autoimmune disorder. But they do form this friendship and a little bit more, possibly. But they live in this town that has like werewolves and whatnot. And that's kind of the premise. There isn't actually much to the plot of this story, but it was still fun to read, which I think is why I've given it 4 stars. And I do really like the art styling. I just wish it was all color and not black and white. My next 4 star is The Woman Who Would Be King by Kara Cooney. This is Hatshepsut's rise to power in ancient Egypt. If you know me, you know that I love anything that has to do with ancient Egypt, mainly their mythology. But I do like to read about their history, especially about Hatshepsut, which I will link down below. A puppet history video on YouTube where they talk about Hatshepsut, and it is fantastic. I love the puppet history series, and Hatshepsut's story is just so fascinating. She was one of the very first and only pharaohs that was female in the time of ancient Egypt, and it's just about like how that happened and all the things that she did as she was pharaoh, and then her death and what happened after her death, because she was erased from history after her death. It was only until I think the 1980s when we found her tomb and we were like, what is this? And we found out that her successor basically erased all the stuff that she did to try and erase her from history. We now know about her, thank God, because she was fantastic, and I did enjoy this story and learning about Hatshepsut, but I do think the writing was just a little too slow paced for my liking and just a little too boring at times, but still enjoyed the story of Hatshepsut. Next 4 star is The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. I finally read another thing by Karen M. McManus. I have read her One of Us is Lying series, which there is a 3rd one coming out, I found out, and I'm very excited. And I really love that series, so I've always wanted to read more by her, and I own all of her other books, but I just haven't read any of them. So I picked up The Cousins, and I read it, and I enjoyed it. It was fine. I didn't see how it was going to end, so I'm glad that I didn't know what the ending was going to be like, and it surprised me. In this, we have a group of teenagers. There's 3 of them. There's Jonah, Millie, and Aubrey, and they are cousins in this family that kind of has a lot of secrets and a lot of juicy drama history. These cousins have never met their grandmother. They barely interact and talk with each other, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, their grandmother invites them to the town slash mansion that their grandma lives in, who, by the way, she is incredibly rich. She kind of lives on a place that's like Martha's Vineyard, but it's not called Martha's Vineyard. But that's essentially the thing, and she's essentially supposed to be like the Martha of Martha's Vineyard. So they go to this town, and they're trying to find out essentially why their grandmother disowned her children, aka their parents and their aunts and uncles, like trying to like solve this mystery, essentially, that's been within their family, especially when their parents and their aunts and uncles have no idea why they were disowned. Their knowledge, they didn't do anything wrong. But we go back and forth between the characters, so we do get multiple POVs, but we also kind of go back and forth between our trio of cousins in the present day, and then we go back in time every now and then to get a perspective of one of the children, one of the parents, at a time before they were disowned. Anyway, I did enjoy this. I thought it was good. I really like Karen M. McManus's writing. I think for me it's a 4-star just because I didn't really have a whole lot of fun reading it. Like, it was still fun, but just, I don't know. It was fine. And then my last 4-star is Demon in the Wood by Leigh Bardugo and Danny Pendergast. So this is also a graphic novel, hardcover graphic novel, which I'm not used to. But this is a prequel to the Shadow and Bone series, which I'm so excited for season 2 to come out. But I have read the book series and I love the book series. And this is following the Darkling before he became the Darkling, and just a little bit of his backstory. So it was, again, it was fine. It was good. I enjoyed it, but it's not like super memorable, if you know what I mean. But I did really enjoy the story, and it gave some, you know, history to the Darkling. Now we're on to 4.5s, and the first of my 4.5 is the sequel to the first book, which I haven't talked about yet. But it's fine. We'll talk about that one later. But a 4.5 for me is Mouse Volume 2. This is a graphic novel / comic nonfiction about Vladek Spiegelman and his time during the Holocaust. He is a Jewish man, and this is his story about being in the Holocaust. I do like the way that this is told, aka within like graphic novel format, but also in the fact that we have Art Spiegelman writing it, which is his son, and we are constantly going back and forth between Vladek's time in the Holocaust and Art and Vladek talking to each other. Now, Vladek is not really a likable character. Like, he says and does a lot of things in like the present day time period. It's not really present day. That I just, he's not a very likable man. But when you see what he's been through, you can kind of understand why he's not a likable man. But it is a little infuriating. But either way, his story is very, it is tough to read, especially when you see pictures of certain things. It's a tough read, but I do very much enjoy it. I do think this one was not as great as the first one, which I will talk about later. My next 4.5 star is Hello, Goodbye, and Everything in Between by Jennifer E. Smith. Okay, this is more like a guilty pleasure 4.5, I feel like, because I just love Jennifer E. Smith's writing, and I love her storytelling, and I love this one. I do have more of my thoughts on this in a vlog where I read the book and then I watched the movie. So I will link that down below as well, so you can get more of my thoughts on this book. It was just a really fun time, and I loved the concept of this romance where we have two teenagers, they've been through a great romance, and then they've made a pact that when they graduate, they would break up and go to separate colleges and live their own separate lives. On this very last day of them being together, so by the end of the day, they're going to break up. They're going on one last date, hurrah, and one of them is trying to convince the other to stay together. And you'll just have to see if they stay together or if they decide to break up in the end. And I loved how the ending was done. I just thought it was a very like realistic love story for teens. My next 4.5 is What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing by Bruce D. Perry and Oprah Winfrey. I truly, truly love this book. I actually have a vlog with this book that is not out yet, and I don't know when it's gonna come out, and I'm very sorry. But this is for a vlog where my roommate recommends books to me. This is one she recommended to me. It's a nonfiction. Obviously, what it says is about trauma, resilience, and healing, mainly about childhood traumas and how it explains how you are the way you are today. Like, instead of asking what's wrong with you, we just ask what happened to you. Like, what has happened in your life that has made you react to certain things within this way. And it teaches us to look at people differently within this world, especially when people are overreacting to certain things. It's just like, okay, why are you overreacting? Like, what has made you act? What happened in your past that is making you act this way? There was a lot in here too that was just like, as Oprah calls them, aha moments. It like explained a lot of things from my childhood, and looking at it in an adult perspective, being like, that's why I'm a people pleaser. That's why I'm a perfectionist. It just explains a lot about me. And so I truly love this book for that. The only reason I'm giving it 4.5 instead of 5 is because they have some like diagrams here and there, and a lot of the times the diagrams just I don't understand the diagrams. But I also loved the way that this book was written. Sorry, that's another thing I need to talk about, even though you'll hear me talk about that within the vlog. But it is written in conversation style. So like, you have Bruce and Oprah going back and forth talking about a certain topic within the chapter, and it makes you feel like you're a part of the conversation almost, and it's really truly great. And then my last 4.5 star that I have here is Bullet Train by Kotaro Isaka. This is another one where I was going to do a book to movie adaptation video for, but I don't know, I wasn't in the mood for filming, and I didn't think I was doing a great job with filming, and just was not in it. So I just read the book, I also watched the movie, and I just didn't discuss it with you guys. But I truly enjoyed this book, and because I didn't do a video, I'm going to say that I think the book was better than the movie. This is just such a fun and wild time, and I did make a prediction in the beginning of the book, and my prediction was correct, so I can't quite give it 5 stars because it was a little bit predictable, but it's just a really fun time. And this is about, there are like 7 or 6 or whatever, like different assassins on this train, all after the same briefcase. But it is so crazy. There is one character as well that is so tough to read from, because like the way he thinks and his mind is so disturbing. But it is fun, and it is quite different from the movie. So if you like the movie, I also recommend the book, because you will definitely get something different from the book. They are not the same. Same concept, but just completely different in pretty much every other aspect. Now we're here finally at the 5 stars, and I am so excited to tell you a 5-star book that I have read is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Taylor Jenkins Reid is definitely, for sure, one of my all-time favorite authors. I've never given her book less than 4 stars. I truly love her stuff. Most of her stuff is 5 stars. I think I've given 1 4-star and 1 4.5, but everything else has been 5 stars. This book takes place in the 90s. We follow a very famous tennis player. Her name is Carrie Soto. Why did I have to look in the flap? Her name is right there in the title. It's been a day. It's more like the 80s she was very famous, and then in the 90s, she's coming back out of retirement to play again because someone is trying to beat her record, and she will not have it. She wants to keep her record as the best tennis player of all time. So it's basically that story, but there is also a little bit of romance in there. There's also a father-daughter relationship story that goes on as well. And it's just fantastic. I read this whole book within 2 days because I just could not put it down. I loved it so much. I have like nothing to say except go read it. That's literally all I've got for you. My next 5-star I have is Mad and Bad, Real Heroines of the Regency by Bea Koch. This is a nonfiction. I actually just realized all the rest of the books here are nonfiction. I'm having a nonfiction era, I guess. I truly like this. This is also a super quick and fast read, which I was surprised at how quickly I read this. But this is following all of true, real women in the Regency era who were kind of badass, and we just don't ever talk about them because they're always overshadowed by the men. Let me give you some examples of some women that we talk about in here. We have Caroline Herschel, who was basically an astrologist. She was kind of an assistant to her brother, who was an astrologist, but she she discovered a bunch of comets. We also have Rolinda Sharples, who painted this painting that is on the back and the cover, obviously not with the pink paint covering all the men's faces, but she was a painter and she painted this picture, which is kind of a very famous picture of the Regency era. We also have Anne Lister, who had a wife and was open about her marriage with her wife. We also have Mary Seacole, who was a nurse battling racial prejudices. It's a really great read, very fascinating, and definitely researched very well. I approve of that book. And then I have Mouse Volume 1, which we have talked about Mouse Volume 2, so we know what this story is about, but this one was just, ooh, the whole series in general just punches you in the heart. And it made me cry. Definitely this first book made me cry. There were a couple of times where I had to like physically put it down and just like take a moment, take a breather, because it's just so disturbing. But it is so important that we know this stuff so we don't ever let this happen again, because this is so tragic. And then lastly, my #1 book of the third quarter, which I am shocked. I did not think this is going to be this high up, but it is Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. This was also within that vlog where I read What Happened to You, so this vlog has not happened yet, but unfortunately we now have spoilers. I loved What Happened to You and I loved Tuesdays with Morrie. I think this is also a case of I read this book at the perfect time. So I had COVID, and in my time of COVID I read this book, and this is a book pretty much all about living, like taking a step back and looking at your life and looking at what makes you happy and what doesn't make you happy and what you need to change about your life. But it's told within a conversation between this young man and an old man who was his professor, who is dying of ALS. And each time he goes to visit his professor as he's dying and getting like weaker and weaker by the moment, he gives him a different lesson about life. And so because I was in a time of COVID, I was quarantined in this room, it definitely made me look at my life while not living it and seeing any changes that I wanted to make within my life. So this definitely had a huge impact and also made me cry by the end. It's one of those things where this isn't a spoiler because you know he dies in the end. It's said in the beginning. It's said in the synopsis, like, and you just know, like, the old man is dying. I knew it was coming, but then it came and I still cried and I was like, no. It was just a really beautifully written book as well about life's greatest lessons. So that is it for my books that I have read for this third quarter. I do also have a video where I talk about the movies that I watched in this third quarter and my thoughts on those movies, so I will put a link down to that below so you can check it out. And yeah, that is it for this video, and I will see you guys later with more videos. Bye!